The wedding ring slipped from Evelyn Carter's trembling fingers and struck the marble floor with a sharp metallic sound that echoed through the silent penthouse. Everyone froze. Her fiancé didn't bend to pick it up. Instead, he stared at the notification glowing on his phone, his face draining of color, as though he had just seen a ghost. "No," he whispered. Evelyn followed his gaze. The screen displayed a single sentence. "If you marry her tonight, your father dies before sunrise." Before anyone could react, every light in the penthouse went dark. A terrified scream shattered the silence. When the backup lights flickered on seconds later, the groom was gone. Only his phone remained on the floor, and next to it, a small silver chess piece stained with fresh blood. If stories full of shocking twists, unforgettable romance, and life-changing lessons are your kind of escape, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and tell everyone in the comments where you're watching from. Now, because what happened next changed not only Evelyn's life, but also the life of the billionaire who had spent years believing that trusting anyone was the greatest mistake a person could make. Nobody moved. Security rushed through the penthouse while guests whispered in panic. Some believed the groom had staged the disappearance. Others thought someone had kidnapped him. Evelyn couldn't hear any of them. Her heartbeat drowned every voice around her. She picked up the silver chess piece. Its edges were still warm. Whoever left it had been standing there only moments earlier. A security guard approached carefully. "Miss Carter? Mr. Harrison's car is still downstairs." "Then where is he?" The guard couldn't answer. An older woman stepped out from the crowd. Grace Harrison, Daniel's mother. Her elegant makeup failed to hide the fear in her eyes. She looked at the chess piece and closed her eyes, as though recognizing an old nightmare. It started again. Evelyn frowned. What started? Grace looked around before lowering her voice. "You need to leave, right now. What about Daniel? If you stay, you'll disappear too." Before Evelyn could demand an explanation, another man entered the penthouse. Tall, broad shoulders, dark charcoal suit, calm gray eyes that seemed to study every detail before anyone else noticed it. His presence silenced the room. Even the security team stepped aside. Someone whispered his name, Alexander Blackwood. America knew him as the billionaire who built one of the world's largest technology empires before turning 40. The media called him ruthless. Competitors called him untouchable. Employees described him differently. They said he never raised his voice. He simply looked at problems until they surrendered. Alexander walked directly toward the chess piece still resting in Evelyn's hand. "May I?" She hesitated before handing it over. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. "So it's true," he murmured. "You know what this is?" Evelyn asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the dark city skyline. "The person behind this always plays several moves ahead." Grace's face turned pale. "No." Alexander nodded once. "They're back." Evelyn stepped between them. "Can someone please explain what is happening?" Alexander finally met her eyes. His gaze wasn't cold. It was cautious, like someone deciding whether telling the truth would protect her or destroy her. "What I'm about to say will sound impossible. I don't care. The man who took Daniel," he paused, "has been dead for 15 years. Silence swallowed the room. Someone laughed nervously. Another guest muttered that the billionaire had lost his mind. Evelyn shook her head. "That's impossible." "I hope you're right." Before she could ask another question, Alexander's phone rang. He answered without looking away from her. After only 3 seconds, his jaw tightened. "Where?" Another pause. "I'll be there." He ended the call. "What happened?" Grace asked. "They found Daniel's watch." "Where?" Alexander looked toward Evelyn again. "In my office." Confusion swept across the room. "That doesn't make sense," Evelyn whispered. Alexander agreed. "It doesn't." He started walking toward the elevator. Evelyn followed. "Wait. You shouldn't come. My fiancé disappeared. And the person responsible may want you exactly where I'm going. Then I'm definitely coming." For the first time, Alexander almost smiled. Not because the situation amused him, because she reminded him of someone. Someone who had once refused to walk away from danger. Someone whose loss still haunted every decision he made. He pressed the elevator button. "You overthink every possibility before making a decision, don't you?" Evelyn blinked. "How do you know that? You looked at 3 exits before choosing this one. So? So people who expect the worst usually learn to do it for a reason." His words struck deeper than she expected. He wasn't wrong. Since childhood, Evelyn had analyzed every conversation, every decision, every possible disaster before taking a single step. Her friends called her cautious. Her therapist called it anxiety. She called it exhausting. She had spent years believing that if she thought hard enough, she could prevent pain. Yet tonight, despite every careful decision, everything had still fallen apart. The elevator doors opened. Alexander stepped inside. "If you come with me," he said quietly, "your life will never return to normal." Evelyn looked back one last time. The wedding decorations, the abandoned flowers, the empty dance floor that would never host their first dance, Daniel's mother silently crying, the bloody chess piece. Nothing about her old life remained. She entered the elevator. The doors closed. Neither of them noticed the tiny camera hidden inside the bouquet lying on the marble floor. Miles away, a man watched the elevator feed on 6 different monitors. He smiled. Then he picked up another silver chess piece and placed it on a board already missing one king. "You made the right move, Evelyn," he whispered. "But you're still playing my game." Alexander's headquarters overlooked Manhattan like a fortress, built from glass and steel. But the moment the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, it felt less like a corporate office and more like the center of an invisible war. Every employee standing outside the boardroom fell silent when Alexander walked past. No one asked questions. No one dared. A woman in a navy suit hurried toward him, clutching a tablet so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "Mr. Blackwood, we've secured the entire building. No forced entry. Every security log has been checked twice. And the watch? In conference room 7. Alexander nodded once. "Evelyn stays with me." The woman glanced at Evelyn with concern, but didn't argue. As they walked down the hallway, Evelyn noticed something strange. Every framed photograph on the walls had been turned backward. She stopped. "Why are the pictures facing the wall?" The assistant hesitated. Alexander answered instead. "They weren't." "What do you mean?" "They were turned around exactly 12 minutes before we arrived." A chill ran through Evelyn's body. "By who?" "That's what we're trying to find out." They reached conference room 7. 2 armed security officers stood outside. Neither looked relaxed. Alexander pushed the door open. The expensive walnut table stretched across the room. At its center sat Daniel's watch. Nothing else. No fingerprints. No note. No sign of how it got there. Evelyn rushed forward. "This is his." She recognized the scratch near the clasp. She had given him that watch 2 birthdays ago. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. It was still ticking. Alexander remained by the doorway, studying the room instead of the watch. "What are you looking for?" Evelyn asked. "The thing everyone else missed. You think this is a trap?" "I know it is." He slowly walked toward the far wall. Without warning, he reached behind a decorative sculpture. His fingers closed around something invisible, a tiny wireless camera. He held it up. It was recording. The assistant gasped. "But our sweep was designed to find ordinary surveillance." He dropped the camera into an evidence bag. "This one isn't ordinary." Evelyn stared at him. "How do you always know where to look?" Alexander's expression hardened. "Because 15 years ago, I failed to." Silence settled between them. Before Evelyn could ask what he meant, every monitor in the conference room suddenly came to life, one by one. Black screens, then static, then a chessboard. A gloved hand moved a black queen across the board. "Check." A distorted voice echoed through hidden speakers. "Welcome back, Alexander." Nobody spoke. The voice laughed softly. "I was beginning to think you'd retired." Alexander folded his arms. "What do you want?" "You know that's never the first question." The hand placed another silver chess piece onto the board. "Ask where Daniel is." Evelyn stepped toward the screen. "Where is he?" A pause. "Alive." Her knees nearly gave way with relief. "For now." Alexander's jaw tightened. "If you hurt him, you still believe this is about revenge." "It isn't?" "No." The voice became almost amused. "This is about unfinished lessons." The screen flickered. An old photograph appeared. 3 young men stood beside a university building. One was unmistakably a much younger Alexander. Another looked strikingly like Daniel's father. The third man's face had been burned away. Evelyn frowned. "Who is the third person?" No answer. Instead, the image disappeared. The chessboard returned. "You have 48 hours. For what?" Alexander asked. "To remember." The monitors went black. The room fell silent once more. Evelyn turned toward Alexander. "You know who that was?" He didn't answer. "You recognize the photograph?" Still silence. Finally, he spoke. "I buried that part of my life years ago. But it's back now." He closed his eyes briefly. Apparently, his assistant broke the silence. "Sir, there's something else." "What?" She handed him another tablet. "The camera outside never recorded anyone entering." "So?" She swallowed. "It also never recorded either of you entering." Evelyn frowned. "What are you talking about?" "We literally walked through the lobby. According to the footage, she turned the screen toward them. The recording showed the lobby, employees working, security guards talking, the revolving doors spinning. But Alexander and Evelyn never appeared. The elevator doors simply opened by themselves. The guards reacted as if greeting invisible people. The cameras showed papers floating as though carried by unseen hands. Coffee cups moving. Doors opening, yet there was no one there. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. This has to be fake. Alexander replayed the footage 3 times. Each angle showed the same impossible thing. Someone had erased them. Not blurred, not edited, erased. He looked at the assistant. Disconnect this building from every external network. It's already isolated. Then whoever did this? He looked at the blank monitor. Is already inside. A loud bang echoed from somewhere above. Another. Then another. The lights flickered. Emergency alarms erupted throughout the building. The assistant's earpiece crackled frantically. "Sir! Someone just accessed the executive vault." Alexander ran. Evelyn followed despite his earlier warning. They reached the biometric vault at the end of the hallway. The 12-inch steel door stood wide open. Impossible. Only Alexander's fingerprints, retina scan, and encrypted key could unlock it. Inside, nothing looked disturbed, except for one object. A small wooden box sat neatly in the center of the room. It hadn't been there that morning. Alexander approached cautiously. He lifted the lid. Inside rested a folded letter. His expression changed the instant he saw the handwriting. "No?" Evelyn looked over his shoulder. "What is it?" Alexander unfolded the paper with shaking hands. Only 6 words were written inside. "You never found my daughter, Alexander." The color drained from his face. He whispered a name he hadn't spoken in 15 years. Isabella. Before Evelyn could ask who Isabella was, a soft voice echoed from the vault entrance. "You finally remembered." They turned together. A young woman stood there in a simple white coat, her face calm, her eyes fixed on Alexander. Then she spoke the words that made everyone froze. "I'm Isabella's daughter." And in that instant, every belief Alexander had held about the past, and every assumption Evelyn had made about the man standing beside her, began to crumble. The young woman's voice barely rose above a whisper, yet it struck Alexander harder than any accusation ever could. "I'm Isabella's daughter." The vault fell silent. Even the blaring emergency alarms outside seemed distant. Alexander searched her face with an intensity that bordered on disbelief. Every feature became another impossible question. The shape of her eyes, the determined set of her jaw, the tiny scar above her left eyebrow. He had seen that scar before. Not on her, on Isabella. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "So I've been told my entire life." Evelyn looked between them. "Someone needs to explain what's happening." The woman smiled sadly. "If he explains it, you'll hate him." Alexander's expression darkened. "I've spent 15 years hating myself. You won't say anything I haven't already said in my own head." The woman stepped into the vault. "My name is Claire. You have proof?" Instead of answering, Claire reached into her coat and removed a worn silver locket. Alexander froze. His breathing became uneven. Evelyn noticed it immediately. "What is it?" Alexander swallowed. "I gave that locket to Isabella the day she graduated." Claire opened it. Inside was an old photograph. 3 smiling college students. Alexander, Daniel's father Thomas, and Isabella. No burned face, no missing person. Just 3 friends who believed the world belonged to them. "You remember now," Claire said. "I never forgot." "No, you remembered the guilt." She took another step closer. "But you buried the truth." Evelyn watched Alexander's shoulders sag, for the first time since she'd met him. The billionaire who intimidated boardrooms suddenly looked like a man carrying a weight no amount of money could lift. "I loved her," he admitted. The words surprised even him. "I never stopped." Claire nodded. "I know." Evelyn frowned. "If you loved her, what happened?" Alexander closed the locket gently before handing it back. "We built dreams together." His voice was distant now. 3 broke college students convinced we'd change the world. He smiled bitterly. "And somehow, we did." Thomas became a financial genius. Alexander built technology. Isabella wanted to create affordable medical care for families who couldn't afford treatment. She believed success meant lifting other people. His eyes clouded. "I believed success meant never becoming powerless again." Claire spoke softly. "That's where you lost her." Alexander nodded. "When investors came, they demanded we abandon Isabella's project. You chose the company. I told myself I'd help people later." His voice cracked. "I thought there would always be time. There wasn't." Silence answered him. Evelyn understood now. Overthinking wasn't only her burden. Alexander had spent 15 years replaying one decision, convincing himself he could have saved everything if he'd chosen differently. Claire folded her arms. She disappeared 2 months later. I searched. You searched after she was gone. I hired investigators. You hired them because guilt finally became louder than ambition. Alexander lowered his eyes. He couldn't deny it. Claire reached into her pocket again. This time she produced an envelope. She wrote this before she vanished. Alexander hesitated before opening it. The handwriting was unmistakable. If you're reading this, it means you're looking backward again. You always did that when you were afraid. You think every mistake defines you forever. You're wrong. People aren't destroyed by one bad decision. They're destroyed when they stop making better ones. Alexander stopped reading. His vision blurred. Claire continued. She never hated you. He looked up. What? She knew exactly why you made your choice. Then why did she leave? Claire's eyes filled with tears. Because someone wanted all three of you gone. A cold silence swept across the vault. Evelyn leaned forward. What do you mean? Claire looked toward the open doorway. My mother didn't disappear. Then what happened? She was running. From who? The same person who's playing chess with all of you. Alexander's heartbeat quickened. The man we thought died. Claire nodded. He never died. Every clue suddenly rearranged itself inside Evelyn's mind. The threatening message, the chess pieces, Daniel's disappearance, the erased security footage, the photograph. Nothing had been random. Someone had been rebuilding a story that began decades earlier. But why now? Evelyn asked. Claire answered without hesitation. Because he finally has every piece he needs. Before anyone could respond, Alexander's assistant burst into the vault. Sir, she was out of breath. We found Daniel. Evelyn's heart leaped. Where? The assistant's expression made the hope disappear instantly. He walked into one of our warehouses 30 minutes ago. He's alive? Physically, yes. What does that mean? He doesn't remember who he is. Silence. Evelyn stared. What? The doctors say he recognizes language, objects, everything. The assistant looked directly at Evelyn. But he doesn't recognize you. Evelyn felt the floor shift beneath her. No, he doesn't recognize anyone. Without another word, she ran. Alexander caught up beside her as they rushed toward the elevators. Listen to me. I'm not listening. Evelyn, she stopped only because his voice had softened. You cannot blame yourself. Her eyes filled. I should have noticed something was wrong. You couldn't have. I overthink everything. Her voice broke. I imagine every possible disaster before it happens. She laughed bitterly through tears, and somehow I still missed the real one. Alexander looked at her with a sadness that came from experience. Overthinking gives us the illusion of control. She stared at him. It convinces us that if we worry enough, we'll prevent pain. He shook his head. But pain doesn't ask permission. The elevator doors opened. Neither moved. I wasted 15 years replaying one decision, Alexander continued. I convinced myself that if I'd chosen differently, Isabella would still be here. He looked directly into Evelyn's eyes. Do you know what that thinking stole from me? She remained silent. 15 more years. The words settled deep inside her. He wasn't telling her to stop caring. He was telling her that living inside yesterday had quietly stolen tomorrow. For the first time since the wedding, Evelyn's breathing slowed. Not because her problems had disappeared, because she realized she couldn't solve today's crisis by endlessly replaying yesterday. The elevator reached the ground floor. Just as the doors opened, every phone inside the lobby vibrated simultaneously. Employees looked down in confusion. So did Alexander. A single message appeared on every screen. Congratulations, you've passed the first lesson. Now choose who survives the second. Beneath the message were 2 live video feeds. One showed Daniel sitting alone in a white room, staring blankly at the wall. The other showed an older woman tied to a chair. Grace Harrison. A countdown began. 29:59, 29:58, 29:57. And below it, one final sentence appeared. You can only save one. The countdown reached 29:41 before anyone remembered how to breathe. The lobby erupted into chaos. Employees shouted over one another. Security teams grabbed radios. Phones rang without answers. Evelyn couldn't tear her eyes away from the split screen. Daniel sat perfectly still, his empty gaze fixed on nothing. There was no fear in his expression, no recognition, just a man whose memories had been stolen. Grace fought against the ropes binding her wrists. She looked terrified, but alive. The timer continued to fall. 29:22, 29:21. Alexander spoke with startling calm. Nobody chooses. His security chief looked at him in disbelief. Sir, if the threat is real, it is. Then we have to prioritize. Alexander turned sharply. The moment we accept his rules, we've already lost. He faced the giant screen again. He's manipulating us into thinking there are only two options. Evelyn stared at him. You think it's another illusion? I think it's another move. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. He answered without hesitation. The distorted voice returned. I wondered how long it would take. Alexander didn't respond. You're better than you were 15 years ago. What do you want? I already told you. No. You told me the game. The voice chuckled. I want something much more valuable. And what's that? I want you to stop overthinking. Alexander frowned. For the first time since this nightmare began, the words didn't sound like mockery. They sounded personal. The voice continued. You've spent half your life calculating every possible outcome. You built an empire because you predict people before they act. You study risks, you avoid mistakes, and yet, a pause. You've never realized your greatest mistake wasn't making the wrong choice. It was believing you could control every choice. Alexander's grip tightened around the phone. Who are you? You still don't recognize my voice. Click. The call ended. Evelyn looked at him. What did he say? Alexander repeated every word. When he finished, Claire had gone completely pale. No? Alexander turned. What? I've heard those words before. Where? Claire swallowed. My mother used to repeat them whenever I was afraid. She closed her eyes, remembering. You don't overcome fear by predicting tomorrow. You overcome it by choosing today. Alexander's heartbeat quickened. Isabella used to say that. Claire nodded slowly. Exactly. A horrible realization settled over everyone. The kidnapper wasn't just targeting them. He knew Isabella intimately. Too intimately. 20 minutes later, Alexander's private jet was airborne. Not because they were escaping, because the GPS coordinates hidden inside the live feeds pointed toward an abandoned estate outside Boston. The same estate where Alexander, Thomas, and Isabella had celebrated their college graduation decades earlier. The coincidence was impossible. Evelyn sat across from Alexander, watching him stare out the window. You're blaming yourself again. He gave a faint smile. Am I that obvious? You haven't blinked in 2 minutes. He laughed quietly. You notice everything. No. She looked down at her hands. I notice everything I think could go wrong. Silence settled between them. Finally, she spoke again. My father used to tell me that overthinking meant I cared. Alexander looked at her. What do you think now? I think, she struggled to find the words. I think I spent years preparing for disasters instead of preparing for life. Alexander nodded slowly. I spent years building walls. And they became prisons. Their eyes met. For the first time since they'd met, there was no mystery between them. Only honesty. It lasted 3 seconds. The cockpit door burst open. The pilot looked shaken. Mr. Blackwood, what is it? We've lost navigation. Impossible. Not impossible. Every screen inside the cabin suddenly displayed the same image. A black chessboard. Then text. Wrong destination. The plane lurched violently. Warning alarms screamed. The pilot grabbed the doorway. Someone just overrode the autopilot. Alexander rushed into the cockpit. The controls were moving by themselves. Coordinates were changing faster than human hands could type. The aircraft banked sharply. Evelyn held onto her seat. Can they crash us? The co-pilot answered honestly. If they wanted to, he didn't finish. Because every alarm suddenly stopped. The controls froze. Then a calm female voice filled the cabin. Flight path restored. Everyone stared. It wasn't the aircraft computer. It was someone speaking through it. Claire. Except, Claire was sitting behind Evelyn. The voice continued. You're finally listening. Alexander frowned. Who is this? I'm someone who spent 15 years waiting for you to stop looking backward. The transmission ended. Claire looked horrified. That wasn't me. I know, Alexander said. But whoever it was, he looked at her carefully. Sounds exactly like your mother. The jet landed safely, but not in Boston. It had been diverted to a small private airstrip in rural Vermont. Waiting beside the runway was a single black vintage car. Its engine was already running. No driver. Only an envelope resting on the passenger seat. Inside was another note. Stop planning, start trusting. One of you already knows the way. Evelyn frowned. What does that mean? No one answered. Then Claire slowly raised her hand. I've been here before. Alexander turned sharply. You said you'd never seen this place. I thought I hadn't. She pressed her fingers against her temples. But something feels familiar. She looked toward the dense forest beyond the airstrip. I know that road. How? I don't know. She began walking without waiting for permission. Evelyn exchanged a worried glance with Alexander. This could be another trap. It probably is. Then why are we following her? Alexander watched Claire disappear between the trees. Because sometimes, he took a deep breath. The only way out of a trap is to stop assuming every path leads to one. For the first time in years, he chose instinct over calculation. They followed. Half a mile into the forest, the trees opened into a forgotten stone chapel, swallowed by vines and time. The front doors stood open. Inside, dozens of candles burned as though someone had been expecting them. At the altar lay a single leather journal. Its cover bore one name, Isabella. Alexander's hands trembled as he reached for it. But before his fingers touched the journal, a familiar voice echoed through the empty chapel. Soft, gentle, impossible. Alexander, he froze. The color drained from his face. Slowly, very slowly, he turned toward the sound, and standing in the shadows at the back of the chapel was a woman who had supposedly vanished 15 years ago. Alexander forgot how to breathe. The candles flickered as though the room itself had inhaled. The woman stepped forward. Her hair was streaked with silver now. Fine lines framed her eyes. Time had left its mark, but not enough to erase the face Alexander had searched for in crowds, interviews, airports, and dreams for 15 long years. His voice broke. Isabella. Tears filled Evelyn's eyes before she even understood why. Claire stood frozen. She wasn't staring at a stranger. She was staring at the woman whose face she had spent her entire life trying to remember from fading photographs. The woman smiled sadly. Hello, Claire. Claire's knees buckled. No. The word escaped as a sob. No. You're dead. I know. The woman took another step. They wanted you to believe that. Claire's tears came all at once. They told me you abandoned me. I never did. They said you chose your work over me. I fought every day to come back. Claire shook her head violently. Stop. She wanted to run into her mother's arms. She wanted to scream. She wanted to believe. Instead, years of unanswered questions held her in place. You should have found me. The sentence shattered Isabella more than any accusation. I tried. No. Claire's voice cracked. You should have tried harder. Silence consumed the chapel. Alexander watched helplessly. He had imagined this reunion 1,000 times. Not once had he imagined that love alone wouldn't be enough. Isabella lowered her eyes. You're right. Claire blinked. What? I should have. She didn't defend herself. She didn't offer excuses. She accepted the pain. I failed you. Those 3 words broke something inside Claire, because they were the only words she'd secretly hoped to hear. Not explanations, not blame, just truth. She crossed the distance in a heartbeat. Mother and daughter embraced so tightly it seemed 15 stolen years were trying to fit into a single moment. Evelyn quietly wiped away a tear. Alexander looked away, giving them the privacy they deserved. Yet he couldn't ignore the ache in his own chest. When Isabella finally looked at him, the years between them disappeared. You still overthink everything. He laughed through tears. You always knew. You'd analyze every conversation we had. I thought I was protecting us. You were trying to protect yourself. He nodded. I know. She walked closer. I read every article about you. You did? I watched you become one of the richest men in the world. Her smile carried pride and sadness together. But I never saw the boy who laughed without looking over his shoulder. Alexander lowered his head. I buried him. No. She gently touched his arm. You convinced yourself he was gone. For several seconds, neither spoke. Finally, Alexander whispered the question that had haunted him for 15 years. Why didn't you come back? Isabella's expression darkened. I couldn't. She walked toward the altar and picked up the leather journal. Everything you need is in here. She handed it to him, before he could open it. A slow clap echoed through the chapel. One clap, then another, then another. Every candle suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Emergency lights hidden in the ceiling switched on. A man stepped from behind the old organ. Gray suit, silver hair, calm smile. He looked like a respected university professor. Not a criminal, not a kidnapper. Not the architect of 15 years of suffering. Alexander stared at him in disbelief. It can't be. The man inclined his head. Good evening, Alexander. Evelyn frowned. You know him? Alexander's voice was barely audible. Professor Nathan Hale. Claire's eyes widened. The ethics professor. The man smiled. I always appreciated attentive students. Evelyn couldn't understand. This is the man behind everything? Nathan sighed almost theatrically. Such an ugly description. He slowly walked toward them. I prefer teacher. Alexander's fists clenched. You destroyed our lives. No. Nathan shook his head. I revealed them. You kidnapped Isabella. I rescued her. You stole Claire. I protected her. You erased Daniel's memories. Nathan's smile finally disappeared. I removed the burden that was crushing him. The statement sounded insane, yet Nathan spoke with complete conviction. He looked at Evelyn. Tell me. She didn't answer. You've spent your entire life imagining everything that could go wrong, haven't you? Her silence was answer enough. And did it make you happy? No. Did it protect you? She thought of the wedding, Daniel, the fear, the sleepless nights she'd lived long before any of this began. No. Nathan nodded gently. Exactly. He turned to Alexander. You built wealth because you feared poverty. He looked at Claire. You built walls because you feared abandonment. He looked at Isabella. You disappeared because you feared the truth would get them killed. Then he smiled. You've all mistaken fear for wisdom. Alexander stepped forward. You don't get to preach after what you've done. Nathan met his eyes calmly. I expected that. He reached into his jacket and removed a small remote. A giant screen descended behind the altar. Video recordings began playing. Hidden footage. Years of it. Isabella secretly watching Claire grow up from a distance. Alexander funding anonymous scholarships in Isabella's name without anyone knowing. Thomas Harrison meeting secretly with investigators until the day he died trying to find Isabella. Every one of them had loved. Every one of them had sacrificed. Every one of them had believed they were alone. Nathan spoke softly. I never needed to destroy your lives. You did that yourselves. The room fell silent. Because deep down, every one of them knew there was truth buried inside his cruelty. Fear had separated them long before Nathan manipulated the pieces. Nathan placed the remote on the floor. My final lesson is simple, he stepped aside. Nobody here can change yesterday. His gaze settled on Evelyn. But one person can decide what tomorrow looks like. He looked toward the chapel doors. Outside, police sirens wailed in the distance. The authorities had finally found them. Nathan smiled peacefully. The game is over. He raised his hands before anyone could stop him. I surrender. Alexander frowned. No. Nathan tilted his head. No? This isn't your final move. Nathan's smile widened. You finally stopped overthinking. Alexander realized it at the same moment. The surrender was another distraction. He spun toward Isabella. The journal! She opened it. Every page was blank, except the last. 3 words had been written in fresh ink. Checkmate isn't over. A deafening explosion shook the ground beneath the chapel. The stained glass windows shattered inward. The floor cracked. Everyone was thrown violently off their feet. As smoke filled the sanctuary, Evelyn reached for Alexander's hand. Through the dust, she could just make out a dark figure slipping into a hidden tunnel beneath the altar. Nathan had never intended to surrender. He had only wanted them looking the wrong way. And before anyone could stop him, he disappeared into the darkness, carrying with him the one secret that could still change all of their lives forever. The explosion ripped through the chapel like thunder trapped beneath the earth. Stone rained from the ceiling. Alexander wrapped one arm around Evelyn and the other around Isabella, pulling them behind a fallen marble pillar as shattered glass sprayed across the room. Claire crawled toward the opening beneath the altar. Nathan! She could barely see him through the dust. His silhouette disappeared into the tunnel. Alexander was on his feet before the smoke had settled. No, he sprinted after him. Evelyn didn't hesitate this time. She followed, not because she had analyzed every possible outcome, not because she knew it was safe, but because she had finally learned that waiting for certainty was another way of standing still. The tunnel twisted beneath the chapel, illuminated only by dim emergency lights. Nathan's footsteps echoed ahead. Alexander gained ground. Nathan! The older man stopped at the edge of an underground platform overlooking a rushing river. There was nowhere left to run, or so it seemed. Nathan turned slowly. For the first time, his calm smile had disappeared. You finally caught up. Alexander's chest rose and fell rapidly. It's over. Nathan glanced toward the river. No. It is. You still think winning means catching me. Alexander didn't answer. Nathan looked almost disappointed. After everything I've taught you, you taught us fear. I exposed it. You manipulated people. I revealed who they became under pressure. You destroyed families. Nathan's expression hardened. No. They destroyed themselves the moment they let fear choose for them. Evelyn stepped beside Alexander. No. Nathan looked at her. You were wrong. His eyebrows lifted. Were I? I spent years believing that if I worried enough, I'd prevent heartbreak. She took another step. But all I did was experience the pain twice. Nathan remained silent. I suffered for disasters that never happened. She smiled faintly. And when real tragedy came, she reached for Alexander's hand. Thinking harder didn't save anyone. The tunnel became perfectly still. Evelyn continued. What saved us was trusting each other. Alexander looked at her with quiet admiration. The woman standing beside him wasn't the same woman whose wedding had collapsed only days earlier. Fear no longer made her decisions. Hope did. Nathan watched them carefully. "So, you've learned." "I have." He nodded once. "Good." Then he did something none of them expected. He tossed a small flash drive onto the ground. Alexander instinctively picked it up. "Everything," Nathan said quietly. "The proof, the recordings, the names of everyone who helped me." Alexander frowned. "Why?" "Because this was never about escaping prison." The older man's tired smile returned. "It was about seeing whether any of you could escape yourselves." Before anyone could react, police officers poured into the tunnel from both directions. "Federal agents, don't move!" Nathan slowly raised his hands. This time, there was no trick. No hidden tunnel, no explosion, no escape. He surrendered peacefully. As officers placed him in handcuffs, he looked back at Alexander one final time. "I wasn't your greatest enemy." Alexander stared at him. Nathan smiled sadly. "Your fear was." He allowed the officers to lead him away. 3 months later, spring had returned to New York. The city looked exactly the same. The people inside it did not. Daniel sat on a park bench overlooking Central Park. Physical therapy had helped. So had months of neurological treatment. His memories hadn't returned completely. Some probably never would. But he had found peace with that. Evelyn sat beside him. "You seem happy." "I am," he smiled. "I spent weeks trying to remember who I used to be. And I realized something." He laughed softly. "The man everyone wanted back wasn't necessarily the man I want to become." She squeezed his shoulder. "I'll always care about you." "I know." He looked at her warmly. "But we're holding on to different futures." There was no anger, no betrayal, only gratitude. Sometimes love wasn't meant to last forever. Sometimes its purpose was simply to prepare people for who they were becoming. They hugged, then walked away in different directions. For the first time, neither looked back. Claire unlocked the front door of a small medical clinic outside Boston. A new sign hung above the entrance. The Isabella Hope Foundation. Affordable health care. Exactly as Isabella had dreamed decades earlier. Mother and daughter welcomed their first patients together. Not to recover lost years. Nothing could return those. But to honor the years still ahead. Alexander stood alone in the lobby of Blackwood Technologies. He held the old silver chess piece in one hand, then smiled. He dropped it into a glass display case. A reminder. Not of victory, of perspective. His assistant approached. "Your afternoon meetings? Cancel them." She blinked. "You've never canceled investor meetings." "I know. What should I tell them?" Alexander smiled toward the elevator. "Tell them something more important came up." What could be more important? He looked through the glass doors. Evelyn was waiting outside, holding 2 cups of coffee. Not because either of them needed rescuing, because they had chosen each other. "Life," he answered. Months became a year. The tabloids still wrote stories about billionaire Alexander Blackwood. But for once, they weren't about acquisitions or billion-dollar deals. They were about the hospitals his company funded. The scholarships created in Isabella's honor. The mental health initiatives Evelyn helped launch, encouraging people to seek help instead of silently living inside endless worry. One campaign carried a simple message. Don't believe every thought that asks you to fear tomorrow. Millions shared it. Thousands wrote letters describing how it changed their lives. Evelyn read every one. She smiled every time someone wrote, "I finally stopped waiting for certainty before living." Just before sunset one evening, Alexander and Evelyn returned to the old chapel. It had been rebuilt. The broken stained glass windows now depicted a phoenix rising instead of a chessboard. Alexander looked at Evelyn. "Do you still overthink?" She laughed. "Sometimes. So do I." She slipped her hand into his. "But now I know something I didn't before." "What's that?" She looked toward the fading sunlight. "You can't think your way into peace. You choose it." Alexander smiled. "And if tomorrow falls apart?" She leaned against him. "Then tomorrow's Evelyn will deal with it." He laughed harder than he had in years. If this story reminded you that life is too precious to spend trapped inside fear, please subscribe, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and tell us in the comments, what's the biggest lesson you learned from Evelyn and Alexander's journey? As they walked away from the chapel, neither of them knew what challenges the future would bring. They simply knew they would face them together. Because the greatest prison is not failure. It is believing that every possible failure must be solved before life can begin. The people who find lasting peace are not those who predict every storm. They are the ones who learn that, even when storms arrive, they are stronger than the fear that once convinced them never to leave the shore. And perhaps that is the quiet secret of a truly meaningful life. Overthinking asks for certainty, but courage asks only for the next step.